Hey homeschoolers, this is Jennifer from Branch to Bloom, and today I'm going to show you some of the amazing, not Montessori specific materials that we used to teach American history to our kids last year. And I just want to show you some of the features we really liked, talk about the things we didn't like so much, and do a flip through so you can see what the inside of the books look like. So let's get started. So the first thing that we use for our main curriculum is this textbook series. It comes in 3 volumes, and the idea is to use one per year. But my children are kind of advanced readers, and we didn't do the workbooks that go along with these because they don't really like workbooks. We chose to do some other stuff that I'll tell you about instead. And so we actually did all 3 in 1 year. And it's called America's Story by Angela Odell, and this comes from Masterbook Press. So one thing I need to tell you about it is that it is a Christian resource. Our family is Christian, and so this is a Christian resource as a Christian worldview. If you are not Christian, this material will not be a good fit for your family. What I can suggest instead, if you're looking for something kind of similar but that's more secular, is Blossom and Root. They have a really great package and some amazing materials, and I actually looked pretty closely at their materials as well, but we decided to go with this one. So I'm just going to show you the inside of it. It has a couple things that I really like. Okay, the first thing is, this is the first one, and it starts from ancient Americas to the Great Gold Rush. It has a lot of maps, which my children really love maps. So when you first start, let me see, where is page 1? Okay, so it starts with the native indigenous people, not with after Christopher Columbus and all of that. It starts right at the beginning with who was here first. And I really liked that it started there and talked about how America wasn't just this like blank piece of land that we came and created our country on. There were people here and talked a little bit about the hard things. And that's something that I like about this series, is that it doesn't really shy away from things like slavery or things like war, but it does talk about them in what I feel like is a gentle and age-appropriate way. My kids are 9 and 11, so I would say, I'm not sure what, these are meant for elementary age. So you could do, I think maybe, depending on your kid's reading level and writing level, maybe 6 or 7 and up. And we do this as a family resource. So in our family history and science and a couple other subjects, we do everybody together. So there's not, separate curriculum for each of my kids for history. So both my boys did this for 3rd and 5th grade last year. Another thing I really like about it is that there is this timeline that kind of goes across every chapter, has a timeline at the top, and it just tells you kind of like where you are in the story, and it's written in a really narrative way. So it's just a really easy read aloud, and at the end of every section there is a narration break. It's sort of done in a Charlotte Mason style, and so at the end there'll be this little narration break, and it has questions. There's also this these pictures at the end of every section. There are these photos that show, like this one is homes varied by geographic regions, and it shows different native homes. It's very rich in illustration, maps, extra little facts, tidbits, all of those things that my children really like. Like I said, it has a workbook that goes with it that has extra lessons in it that you can do. And a lot of people really, really like doing those. My children, trying to get them to do any extra things that are art or handwriting or anything like that is like pulling teeth. And so they really learn best by reading and narration. And they like to write a story or write like an analysis or a summary, but they don't really want to answer questions in workbooks. So I tend to skip workbooks. Don't shoot me. But anyway, so this is the first one. The second one is from the Civil War to the Industrial Revolution. And then the third one is early 1900s to modern times. Now, along with these, it's what they would call like a living curriculum, because it's it's just so story-based. I really liked that about it. So I recommend America's Story if your family is Christian. I think it's really great. To supplement these, I also bought this book called Famous Americans. It has 52 stories to read with a child. So this is just like short biographies. Henry Ford, it has a bunch of people in it. Civil rights movement, Franklin Roosevelt, Native American people, like all different Americans, just sort of a short little synopsis of their life. And like I said, my kids don't really like workbooks. You can see they did not color any of the pictures in this book. It has coloring if your children like to color. Mine don't. They were perfectly happy to just look at the picture in black and white and read the information. So ours is still in black and white. But if you have kids who really like to color or would like to color it like while you read to them, that would be a good thing for you. This was just a fun little extra thing that we did. Okay, now I will say that the one thing that I didn't love about these two resources is that I didn't feel like they were really, they didn't go into detail about all of the difficult problems in all of our founding fathers and historical figures. They kind of idolized them. And I think that's fair, especially for young children. But my oldest especially, who's getting close to middle school, he's 11 and a half, and he's kind of at that discerning age where he wants to know the real truth about things. And so with that in mind, I also used this resource over the summer to kind of balance that, iconic flavor of history, of historical figures in these first two resources with Howard Zinn, which is a pretty considered sort of a controversial resource, but it tells the story of history from the perspective of the slaves and Native Americans and immigrants to the United States. So I'll just show you, this is the children's version. So there's an adult version as well. This is the children's version. I would say, depending on your child, maybe ages 10 and older, some of the content in here is pretty heavy. I think it's important. I think it's really important for kids to understand that historical figures, yes, maybe they did amazing things, but maybe they also owned slaves or something else. And to see that people are multifaceted and that even great people made mistakes, I think it's just really important for them to see that and to know that if they make mistakes, it doesn't mean that they are valueless, and also that we can accept the great things about our country, but not pretend like we've never made any mistakes as a nation or like we don't need to do anything different in the future. So that was why I included this resource. It talks more from just a minority perspective, and it does have some photos, but it's mostly a chapter book. Here's something. A photo or an illustration of a slave auction. This was pretty heavy for my kids to see, and to realize that it wasn't that long ago in our history. So things like that are in this book. I would recommend reading it yourself before you share it with your children. You may want to just read sections, or maybe it's not right for your family, but it was a really great resource. It's been a great resource for us. In conjunction with history, we also kind of combined geography, and that's how I always sort of do it. The way that we do geography at our house is like a cultural geography, and so we like to talk about people and their stories and their culture at the same time that we talk about where they live and what their history is. So I used this resource from Simply Charlotte Mason called Visits to North America, and they have one for each of the continents. And it has just questions that it is a workbook. It goes along with two books, Hungry Planet and Material World, which I'll link below. I'll link all this stuff below in the description box. So just click on the title of the video and it'll show you all of these resources. So it has some narration questions, some summary questions, and it has map work in it. And then you also read along in Hungry Planet and Material World to learn more about the culture and the food. It's got recipes and all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to talk too much about geography because I'm talking about history today, but I just wanted to mention that we do geography alongside history. And I also love this resource. It's called Fandex, and they have them for all kinds of different subjects. This one is the states, the 50 states one, and so each one has a cutout, sort of the shape of the state, and it has a little bit of factual information, some historical information, and then on the back side it's got a real photo and it shows a picture of where it is in the United States, so it gives it a little bit of context of where it is in the country. And these are a great resource just for kids if they're interested, if they're learning. We memorized where all the states are this year. This tells the capital and all that kind of information, and it's just kind of a fun little thing to have. Another thing that I really, really love is this book. This is probably my favorite supplemental book, and it's not just for US history. This is the Timelines of Everything book from DK. It's the Smithsonian book, and it has literally timelines of just nearly everything in history. And it's beautifully illustrated. It has all kinds of information about everything from ancient history, ancient Mesopotamia, all the way to the Apollo launches and post-colonial Africa, Middle East, Pacific War, just the Soviet Union. Anything that my children have questions about, we can look up in this book and learn more about it. It talks about civil rights and all kinds of the Civil War. There's a lot of American history in here, also a lot of just context and world history, and it shows where you are in the timeline of Earth's history. So, highly recommend this book. Any of these you probably could get from your library, and I don't know about yours, but mine, I've realized that if they don't have a resource that I want, I can request them to purchase it, and they almost always do. So don't be shy in asking. Okay, the other thing that we really love in our house, because my kids are such avid readers, is biographies and historical fiction to supplement. So these are just, I'm not going to go through all of them, but just Blue Willow, Brady, Across 5 Aprils, They Led the Way. This one's about American women. The Sign of the Beaver, this is a pretty famous book about a boy and a Native American boy. Lumber Camp Library, I have shelves, more and more shelves of biographies, and this is a series that we like, Childhood of Famous Americans, and this one's about George Washington, and this one's about Martha Washington. There's a whole series, and my children really like these. We checked out a lot of them from the library. Before we did American history, we did the Story of the World curriculum, and this is a classical resource. It has an audiobook, and my kids really like listening to the audiobook and reading along, or we would read it out loud to each other. It has map work that comes with it and a whole bunch of other workbook resources and projects. We did some of them and some of them we didn't, but I think it's also narrative, and it was a good sort of overview of the history of the world before we started talking about modern and American history. So I just wanted to mention this one is early modern times, so it talks about America. It's a good resource. Another book, Amos Fortune, Free Man. My children really like that one. And then these are old books. This is a series that my kids really like, signature books. I try to find them where I can, thrift books or a few other places, secondhand. They're pretty easy read, but they are amazing stories about famous historical figures, and it really helps our kids to feel like they know the people that we're reading about in their curriculum. So it just kind of gives them a little bit more insight into the character and the person that these historical figures were, to make them real people, because they were real people and not just somebody that's written about in a book. So these are some of my favorite resources for American history, and I hope it was helpful for you. If you'd like to see me show you something else that we use, please just leave that in the comments below. If you have any questions for me, leave those down below as well. And be sure to like this video, and if you're new here, subscribe and share it with a friend if you think they would like it. I hope to see you next time, and thanks for watching.